Let's talk about playing with per capita and scaling. Now, just to remind you that per capita means per person. So if we're talking about M&Ms per capita, well, the goal is to write that as a fraction with per being the fraction bar. So whatever comes first goes on the top, and then people go on the bottom. Always people on the bottom when you're talking about per capita. And then you divide and you go from there. So let's look at this. Which country, using this piece and the number of hospitals, which country has the most hospitals? Well, the number of hospitals is in the middle here. So looking at which is the biggest number, this here. So Colombia has the most hospitals. Well, what country has the largest population? Okay, so the population is over here in millions. Biggest number is here. That's the United States. Can we make a meaningful comparison between two countries, let's say the U.S. and Colombia, regarding the prevalence of hospitals without taking the population into consideration? Why or why not? Now, we could talk for an hour on this, but we're not going to. And the idea is if we have, let's just say 1 million people and 2 hospitals, that doesn't seem very good. But if I had 100,000 people and only 2 hospitals, you're like, well, that's still not good, but it's better, right? So the idea is you have to know how many people are you servicing with these numbers of hospitals. Just looking at the number of hospitals by itself isn't going to give you an idea until you know how many people are those hospitals servicing. That's the important piece. So now let's get into it. We're going to calculate the number of hospitals per capita for the rest of the countries listed. Now, thinking through this, it's really going to depend on your calculator which column you go fill in first. So here's the idea. We're talking about hospitals per person. That's the idea. So let's look at Colombia. I've got 10,635 hospitals and 50.34 million, so times 10 to the 6th. Now, depending on your calculator, some of you can type this in exactly like you see it, right? Make sure you put it in parentheses. Some of you might not feel comfortable with that. So here's the idea. We have our 10,635. This 6 says move your decimal to the right 6 places. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This would be that number, 50,340,000 in standard form. Plug that into your calculator. So for Colombia, we would get 0.0002113. In scientific notation, that's 2113 times 10 to the 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 4th. Now, some of your calculators might give you your answer in scientific notation, then you would change it to standard form. Some of them are going to start in standard form. You're going to need to change it to scientific notation. You're going to have to just figure that out based on your calculator. Okay, go ahead and finish out the rest of the table. All right, so we filled in the rest of the table, making sure we're paying attention to hospitals divided by the population. And again, just a refresher, because the populations are in millions, we have to have that times 10 to the 6th. So that is definitely something we can't just get rid of. Keep that in mind. So double check your answers, make sure these match, and then we're ready to move on. So we have our table with our per capita values listed in. And now we're going to use the number of hospitals per capita for the United States in a meaningful sentence. So that is this piece here. Now remember what per capita means. Per capita means per one person. So this decimal, 0.000187 hospitals per one person. That's what that value means. So your meaningful sentence could be, in the United States, there are 0.000087 hospitals for every person. That's what that number means. That is my meaningful sentence. Now, I can then say to you, does that really mean anything to you? Because it might be meaningful in terms of the data, but I don't know what this number even looks like. That's not a hospital. It's not even close to being a hospital. And this is where we get into the idea of scaling. So small numbers in decimal form are cumbersome. So often we change the scale. Instead of per capita, which again is per one person, calculate the hospitals per 100,000 people for each country listed. Now, generally, if you think about 100,000 people, just so we can kind of get an idea of what this looks like, think about a college football stadium. So the University of Michigan, Ohio State University, University of Alabama, all of these big time schools, their football stadiums hold approximately 100,000 people. So if you think about seeing that football stadium on TV or Google it and look at that, that's about 100,000 people. Okay, so you can get an idea of what that looks like. All right, so there's a couple different ways of thinking about this per 100,000 rate, but let me talk through it mathematically. So per capita, let's play with Colombia here. So Colombia per capita is 0.00021113, and that's like saying over one, right? That's one person. If we want this to really be over 100,000, I could just multiply the bottom by 100,000. And this is the idea, right? Instead of being per one, we want it to be per 100,000. Math is about equality. If you multiply the denominator by 100,000, you have to multiply the numerator by 100,000. And because 100,000 is basically 1 times 10 to the 5th, we can move the decimal 5 places. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Colombia is going to be 21.13. Okay, so this is the mathematics behind it, but the easy way is thinking this is 1 times 10 to the 5th, and therefore we can move the decimal to the right 5 places, right? That's the mathematics. So we get to the United States, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1.87. We get to Israel, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0.92. We get to Latvia, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3.19. If you guys don't talk to yourself while you're doing math, you're missing out on a lot of fun. Okay, so we have finished, and we've done our hospitals per 100,000. Use the number of hospitals per 100,000 for the U.S. in a meaningful sentence. Okay, so, my pen turned off. That's no good. Okay, so again, U.S., we're talking about per 100,000. So thinking through, right, picture a football stadium. So for every 100,000 people in the U.S., make sure you say where we're at, in the U.S., there are approximately 2 hospitals. I'm rounding that, right? 1.87 is approximately, it rounds to 2. Because we're not going to have a partial of a hospital. You either have a hospital or you don't. So that gives us about 2 hospitals for every 100,000 people. That's the average. Okay? Okay. Is the rate per 100,000 people an ideal scale for every country listed in the table? Now, you could argue this either way, right? This is kind of an opinion question. But when we look down to our country of Israel, it has a 0 in the front. Now, 0.92 would round to 1, so that's one thing. But you could say maybe for Israel, maybe 100,000 isn't the best. Maybe 1 million is better, because that will give us a non-zero number in front of the decimal. So, I mean, yes, no, it kind of depends on your piece. You could say yes because 0.92 rounds to 1. That's fine. Or you could say no because they have a non-zero number in the front. I think if you back it up with your thoughts, either one of those could be correct. So now let's go to what might be a better scale. So if we're looking at this, maybe we say, you know what, because of Israel, maybe we should go to 1 million. Well, 1 million is 1 times 10 to the 6th. So that means we're going to move the decimal to the right 6 places. And we're talking about Israel here. So let's go to Israel and let's move it 6 places, which means we have 9.2. So in a meaningful sentence, we could say, in Israel, there are approximately 9 hospitals for every 1 million people. That's what that means, because now our rate is 9.2 per 1 million. Hospitals in the numerator, people in the denominator. That is the idea of the scaling. Now, let's do some rankings of this to kind of see what this looks like. So first, we're going to go low to high. First, by population. Okay, so who has the lowest population? Latvia. Okay, and I'm going to abbreviate just for fun. So after Latvia, we then have Israel. Then we have Colombia. Then we have Mexico, and lastly, the U.S. Great, love this for us. Next, let's look at the number of hospitals. Who has the least number of hospitals? Well, again, Latvia starts it off. Then Israel. Then Mexico. Then the U.S., then Colombia. So you can already see the order is a little different. The last one says, let's look at the hospitals per 100,000. The lowest is Israel, then Latvia. Nope, I lied. Back me up. Second place would go to the U.S., then Latvia, then Mexico, then Colombia. So the whole point of this is just to kind of check it out. What do you notice about this? Well, the U.S. is pretty high when it comes to population in hospitals, but per 100,000, it's on the low end. You could say, well, Mexico kind of finds itself in the middle all over the place, whereas Colombia is in the middle when it comes to population, but the highest in hospitals per 100,000. So you can just kind of look at the difference in how scaling makes a difference when you keep the population or take the population into account. All right, last but not least, let's look at Indiana. So Indiana had 99 hospitals and a population of 6.67 million in 2019. Calculate the number of hospitals per capita in Indiana. Okay, so hospitals per person. Number of hospitals, 99. Population, 6.67 million means times 10 to the 6th. So again, if you want to put that like into standard form, we're going to move our decimal 6 places. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6,670,000. All right, when I divide that, I'm going to get 0.000014843, but I ran out of room. Okay. Letter B, is the number of hospitals per capita for Indiana the same as the number of hospitals per capita for the U.S.? No. That's the answer. No, because Indiana is 0.0000148 and the U.S. is 0.0000187. So Indiana is slightly lower, right? Because of the 148, we're comparing that to the 187 because they both have 4 zeros at the beginning. So the Indiana is actually slightly worse than the country as a whole because we have fewer hospitals per person. And if we scaled that up to be per 100,000, right, the U.S. as a whole is 1.87, Indiana would be 1.48. So it's fewer per person, which makes it fewer per any place you want. So Indiana is behind the U.S. when it comes to hospitals per person.